It says Gavin Turk on his childhood and life as a creator of art and design. I said to Deborah that I was coming, and she said, "Oh well, what? I'm just going to sit in the audience." She said, well, you know, I've obviously got something to say about art and design, and you know, come on, we do this project together, which is about working with children and creativity and education, and you know, somehow there must be a way of joining the two of us together. So I sort of thought, oh well, maybe the childhood bit, it could be less specific, not my childhood, or if it's my childhood, it's born in Guildford, is what we get. I think that there's a sort of idea that when you see an artist's name in a catalogue or an exhibition, they quite often write where the artist was born. Mm-hmm.
Or where they're based, or it's always about cultural identity.
Quite often where they were born.
Yeah.
And quite often that doesn't actually really bear, or could, well, not really bear any resemblance on anything. I mean, seemingly, lots of people go abroad to have children and then come back to where they're from as well. That happens. Just to start with the business of art and design, I recently got an appointment as a professor at the Bath Spa University, and it was quite interesting as I went to accept the professorship, and the dean of the department said, "Oh, and by the way, I'm off. I'm going to Rhode Island to run the project, to run the art school in Rhode Island," and so I've basically now been at Bath for 5 days as a professor of art and design, which actually means in a strange way, and I think probably the art education in Germany works differently to how it does in the UK, but it means that I don't really have a department, or that my role is a sort of overarching role where I'm kind of able to get in touch with and to talk to students from all the departments in the university. But it did start to make me think, this whole idea of art and design. I just wanted to, this is all just a bit of a preamble, I'm afraid, but this is just sort of like what has come to my mind in relationship as a response to doing this talk. That somehow art and design, the fact that you've got these two distinct things, like art and design. So the art is seemingly a condition, and design is a process. The two things aren't really, they're not really in the same, they don't really live in the same world. And somehow, like, I thought, well, maybe we could go more into this. Maybe we could look more into the kind of category of the process of design and think about art through the process of design. And maybe we could start to think about, or I could maybe even think about my work, or I could show some slides of things that I've made and try to think about those in terms of design. Because in some ways, it seems to me, design is more about just recognizing moments where something can make a transference, where something can kind of become something else. I think there's been quite a lot of talk about transference. I've worn my sort of special shoes to this event, which I made by accident when I was delivering some paint to an exhibition space. That I opened the boot of the car, and the pot of paint just simply fell on my shoes and on the road. And I was sort of so horrified, I just stood there, just totally kind of still, and looked. And then I managed to climb out of my shoes and put some other shoes on, and just kept these shoes, and the paint dried. And somehow something happened where I sort of designed redesigned some shoes. Is that getting somewhere?
What, in the process of like crossover
am I
between
starting
axes?
to get something across? Is it art? I mean, is it design? Like, I'm still quite keen on the idea that somehow art and design always seem to go together, but they don't sort of live together. They don't sort of actually, they're always in two separate rooms somehow. Or one's a house and the other is just the circling around the house. There's the movement around the house. So if I shall I just...
Yeah, let's slide on.
So what I have as well, and I think that Deborah will probably say something similar, is it is a set of slides that I use more generally. I think. I mean, I've used them for another situation. I think this situation, I want to try and look at my own work through a certain kind of filter.
Cool.
Is that? Oh, I used the clicker.
You're the man in control.
Oh, yeah. In 1990, actually it was 1989, I spent the whole year trying to invent what I thought could be the best name to have as an artist. What name could you give yourself, which would be the most sort of, which would start you off with the best possible chance? I went through a lot of different kinds of name, whether it was important to be a woman, whether it was important to be of a different ethnic background, whether it was important to be pronounceable, to be spellable, and after a year of trying out different names and trying them into different kind of places and spaces, I sort of realised that maybe I could use my own name. So it became like a found object. I mean, it wasn't something that I designed. It was something that I found, or it was something that my parents designed. It was something, obviously, that contained certain bits of small cultural information. It also, strangely enough, contains larger cultural connections as well, because the word Turk obviously describes a whole country as well, and it's quite short, so it's not too taxing to.
I mean, obviously, I'm personally a big fan of Gavin as well.
To write it out, Gavin's okay.
Gavin
as well.
is an exceptionally good name.
So we ended up. I ended up thinking, well, maybe I can just use my own name, and I would then write it across the middle of some canvas panels. Also, spending a bit of time practicing the signature. The signature I use for my art is not the same as the signature I use for my checkbook, signing checks and stuff. Like I've got almost like a different personal life to the art life. Like that somehow the art life or the artist element undergoes a certain kind of filtration process, and maybe that filtration process is design. I don't know if you can actually read that, but it was sort of the signature of the work, which was to say that everything about the work was made from recycled materials. I recycled the canvas. I didn't use any nails. I just strung the canvas onto the wood. I planted a tree to replace the wood that I'd taken. I sort of burnt some wood to make the pigment with. I sewed this by hand with cotton, and so the idea was it was a sort of environmental painting that somehow that somehow I'd made this sort of arrogant statement of the unknown author, and I kind of wrapped it up with a kind of not really an apology, but a kind of explanation that really, I've done as much as I can not to impact on the world at the same time as trying to impact. I mean, and I think this element as well of impact and of how to make in a way, make what we already know, or make what we've got, to make that work again for us, to make again what we already know. I might just whiz through now.
No, do. I mean, what's also interesting with the use of your name, and it's obviously something you've done throughout your career, were you interested not only in the personal level, but, well, what interested you about the idea of identity connected to that and the importance of an artist's name?
I think it was just the sort of education that I was getting from going to museums or galleries and looking at the way that art historically, the name of an artist or the signature of an artist, which is quite often reduced to the name of the artist, like becomes a sort of shorthand to the information. Like you could just simply use an artist's name, and everyone would assume a certain kind of intellectual position by using the artist's name. That an artist's name could almost like stand in the place of an idea or a kind of aesthetic or of a kind of a way of thinking, I suppose.
Also, at the same time, the way that you've used your name, which has also been really, actually very aesthetically interesting.
Using my body as well.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, my name, I think also, like, the other thing to mention is that I use my name to almost as its opposite. Like, I used my name as the name of an artist that people didn't know. So it was used as, in a way, a kind of, it was used as its opposite. So if I use myself in a work, it was used as kind of like not the person that it might look like. And again, so in terms of something looking like and then not being what it was, these works are bronze sculptures that are then painted to look like what they formerly were.
The first piece of yours I ever saw, I think I tripped on it.
Did you?
Yeah, which, because you really, they're often the way you installed these works were in the corners of galleries or near the door, and it really authentically feels like a bin bag.
There's always a bit of a problem with that as well, because I'm never quite sure how much at what point the work stops and what point the work starts, and how much you can play with the positioning. If you put the work in a kind of odd position, that in itself has a certain kind of element of play within it, which may be, again, like complicating the work, or is it necessary to play those things, to play that game?
What's quite interesting about all those works, and maybe your work in general, is also that kind of egalitarian nature where you're playing with, if signatures are there signifying value and elitism and art historical shorthand, it's quite interesting also to be making work out of things like styrofoam cups and bin bags and apple cores and things that are kind of art historically ignored.
I think also, like, what happens with me quite often is, like, the moment I realise that something is kind of exhausted or is sort of finished or is kind of almost like ready for disposal, ready to get rid of, I sort of almost then start to become interested in it. It's almost like there's a kind of a point at which you're waiting for the value of something to be exhausted or to be kind of fully dissipated. Then you could take that. You could then take that object and, in a way, retrace the story of that object or of that thing, which will tell you or show you something about who you are or what this is about. This.
Skipping over like some giant eggs.
Yeah. So this is a sort of double che, not che. So it's actually a portrait of me in the guise of Che Guevara, in the photographic sense of Alberto Corda, sort of done in a kind of Andy Warhol style. So it's a sort of a kind of, it's a massive cliche as well, like on seemingly on every level. I mean, one of the things that most interested me about the Alberto Corda photograph of Che Guevara is that it's an image, or it's one of the only images I know, that the more degraded it gets, the more authentic it becomes. So if you distress, if you've got a T-shirt with Che Guevara on it and it's really distressed and virtually there's nothing there, firstly, you still recognize the image, you still know what it is. And secondly, like, the more distressed it is, the more, in a way, like, reality it achieves, the more, in a way, like, the more kind of power it has. And the more, in a way, like, the more authentic it becomes. So, you know, in terms of a process of repetition and degradation, it seemed like a perfect thing for me to try and use, or to try and incorporate within my work. I thought of something with this earlier on, but now I can't remember what it was. That was useful, wasn't it? Design. I think just driving by, I saw one of those, the chocolate, the nutcracker, and he sort of looks a little bit like.
He does.
But then I thought maybe that the tunic or the military outfit, maybe there is a relationship
with nutcrackers,
with the nutcracker outfit.
I'm sure it is. They look like little soldiers, don't they?
And that obviously there's something within this costume, or this sort of like this, in a way, like historic tableau, which when you look further into it, I mean, obviously for me, I'm still standing in a metre-by-metre frame holding a gun, and now my spiky hair has just become a big sort of bear kind of hat. I'm still a sort of a tourist attraction, like the Sex Pistols. I'm still a waxwork museum sculpture like Madame Tussauds. So there's a sort of sense of trying to kind of incorporate more or less obvious cultural references, using cultural references again to try and somehow like to take different cultural references from different points and sort of like place them together in the same space.
Do you think this is a moment where art and design can kind of cross over? At the moments when things become cliches and art historical things become so much part of our visual language internationally and for an audience, do you think those are the moments when they get that almost art goes beyond from the position of what art is and becomes something else within our visual language, and that perhaps crosses over to what design is, or what design can be, or even just sort of elements to be recycled within that?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose art itself as a condition, like, it doesn't actually have, it's a very kind of open-ended kind of environment where there's always sort of like hovering over and around the artwork. There's always a sense that possibly it isn't art. Or maybe its use or its function is to question what it is, to question art, is to sort of it's art to question art, or it's something which has been created in a way to deconstruct itself in front of your eyes, and to allow the audience to witness the deconstruction of it, which will help them to get a better understanding of other things that they're looking at, if that's possible. And maybe that's a bit of a large ask.
I think if design is a series of problem-solving activities to kind of get the thing that will perfectly fit that function, the design of a good artwork is one where somehow all the elements and ingredients are put together in a way that you kind of, it just is going to be that way. And I think that I think any good artwork of anyone's, you know, whatever kind of art people are making, you kind of need to feel that that's just the way it is, and then you have to kind of go through the curiosity as a viewer of why they got to the decisions that they made, and how they made it, and what clues they're giving you about what they're thinking about. And I think that with good design, that those questions should be innate within the the way that you make the kind of architecture, or that there's something which just feels right about it, and the way that those decisions have come together, like, is part of the kind of curiosity as a viewer of engaging with it.
Quite dark.
I like these ones.
It's very dark, these slides, I'm afraid. But so
you need to explain them a bit.
I'm going to explain them a bit. Basically, what happened here was what happened.
Having said it's perfect design.
I ended up making a clay bust of my own head, which I then invited people to come. Firstly, I did it in Venice, and then later on I did it in my studio, to just invited people to sort of take part and to play with the clay. I actually did it in a project in Frankfurt as well, later on. Each sculpture was moved around so that there wasn't just one person working on each head. So each head had more than one other person on it. So I didn't want to just simply sort of replace signature with another signature, if you like. So we ended up with bicycles. We ended up with a set of 94 clay heads, which are all sort of turned into sort of wild and wonderful, some grotesque, some kind of quite elegant kind of interpretations of the clay, the sort of classical clay bust. And somehow they were made through a process. So they were kind of made, I suppose, through this. I mean, maybe design is the creation of a kind of gap, I suppose. I don't know. I'm still sitting up here trying to think about what it is I'm talking about.
What I find really interesting about those is, well, I mean, it's kind of one of the most immediate. Using your body and your face and your name and you as a starting point in everything almost has created a practice which could be referred to as the idea of an artist as a brand, or as the identity of Gavin Turk. Is that something that interests you, or is it something that's accidental to what you've done?
I mean, I think as a brand, I think that because everything becomes a brand, you know, if you say something enough times, somehow it becomes a brand. You could make a brand out of anything. You say a word like 3 times before you go to bed, and 3 times when you get up, and suddenly it's a brand. It's a sort of a brand through that brands sort of like arrive through repetition almost. I mean, I think if Gavin Turk is a brand, I think Gavin Turk hopefully is a brand which in the purpose of which is to somehow take apart the notion of brands, if that's a possible thing. So I made a series of bicycles in 2010, which were based on André Caderet's staff, these bars de bois rondes, these wooden bars that he would carry around and take them into a gallery, and somehow, like, he would be exhibiting in that exhibition just because he'd taken this pole into the show.
He used to leave them around walls, didn't he, in Venice and stuff like that? Yeah.
They were requested in the end, but at one point he would just literally just arrive with his pole, and he would also send out invitations saying that he was going to be at a certain point in a town in Paris or wherever it is, carrying his pole, and he would record quite carefully where it was that he went with carrying his pole, and at that moment he'd be making art, and the process would be an art process. I made a series of bicycles, so somehow like walking with the pole could then be promenaded with the bicycle. And I made a kind of a fleet of bicycles that then, where this photograph was taken was actually outside Frieze, London, and there was the audience were invited to take a bicycle and ride it around Regent's Park, and then they would get a certificate of authenticity saying that they'd been in artwork by me. So there was a sort of sense that simply by riding a bicycle like this was suddenly like an art piece. Why have I put this in here? I've put this in here because of the idea of design. This was a work, maybe it links together. I think that this is the last picture. Is it? No. This is actually a sculpture which is a curbstone, a granite curbstone, just buried in the ground. And the idea is that you kiss it, and then you achieve something. We'll say, blank. You get blank what you want. And I've actually kind of I had someone counting. So now like this stone has had 2,000 people kiss it.
Wow.
And when it's been out in sort of in a public show, and this it's actually obviously kissing the curb in English is obviously getting drunk, falling over, and hitting your head on the curb. But there was a sort of idea of again like sculpture that you were supposed to interact with, sculpture that you touch, sculpture that in a way is the sum of its interaction. So the more a work is interacted with, the more it becomes the work it's supposed to be.
And what's interesting, looking at this and the bicycles before, is they're very functional designed items that we're used to interacting with in their pure, simple form, and you've transformed them through that interaction into something else completely. So they kind of defunctionalize by giving them a new function.
Kind of. Yeah, I mean, and also, I suppose, well, the bicycles still function as bikes. I mean, you still can cycle on them, but there is a sort of a point at which you're not just cycling on them. I think that's, I mean, you are and you're not. I mean, it is the way, it is the sort of, the way that an object under certain conditions or in a certain, in a certain context, could quite easily become a picture of its former self, could quite easily become a kind of an aesthetic version of what it was before. So it then becomes something for its purpose, the reason for being is different. It's something for thinking about or looking at or kind of, or describing in a different way. It shows you different things. So this is another. This is a 5-degree angle as well. It's just looking at the building earlier on, Jürgen's building that was at 5 degrees. And this is actually the sculpture. So this is a 12-meter bronze nail, and again, like Richard this morning talked about how he couldn't even make a nail. He'd have to use a stick and a bit of and a stone. This is a 12-meter nail which is stuck into the pavement in a building which has been put just behind St Paul's Cathedral. And it's a new Jean Nouvel. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I have actually. I think the weird shopping
good
centre.
Correct answer. Yeah.
Though I have to say, I don't know if I noticed the public sculpture. Is that a terrible thing? I saw the shop nearby over where the tube station.
There you go.
I missed the 12-meter long nail.
There you go. And then this is I think this is the last piece, which is called Large Door. Oops.
Well, actually, it's a really nice crossover to your work, thinking of this and the kind of... Sorry.
Yeah, no, but I'm just basically starting to go, and we're starting to look at the way that, I mean, apart from the nail possibly, some of the more recent works do involve the idea of audience and participation. And actually the door and the stone functioned in our wedding that we had, which in the end was a theatrical wedding, which was a wedding which invited our friends, but also an audience to come and see an exhibition that we'd made, and to somehow take part within a kind of a larger art sort of experience. Do you want to?
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
What's that? I can't read what that says. Are we going to just go, will it just go straight through?
To her?
To Deborah's.
Cool. Well, we can talk a little bit before the things are off anyways. So do you want to describe essentially what the House of Fairy Tales project is and how you work together within this?
I have to confess to only really knowing that I was going to come and join, kind of hijack a bit of Gavin's talk about 4 o'clock yesterday. So I've done all the things that Richard said that we shouldn't do, which is like I'm going to read from actually my computer because we couldn't print it out, and I'm also going to show you some slides which we'll put together for some other purpose, just to give you kind of a bit more of a sense of what it is. But one of the things I think we've kind of haven't touched on today in all the areas of design that we've moved into is thinking about children and design. And I wrote something which I thought hopefully could give a kind of good reason why I think that thinking about childhood in design is a really, really good way of thinking about how we move into the future.
But also, because obviously, like within inside design is the word sign, and design is about signs, and so a sign is something that you don't intrinsically know what it means. You have to come into an understanding of what it means. So design, in its very nature, requires a process of learning and a process of kind of coming into an understanding of it so that you can then read it or understand it. So it seems only natural to go back to
the beginning.
The beginning. Let's go back to the beginning.
I'm going to read this in because I'm not very used to public speaking and I was a bit worried I just wouldn't know what to say.
No, don't worry.
When our first child, Curtis, was born nearly 19 years ago, we determined to bring him with us to every art opening, party, exhibition and adventure we went on. We didn't understand the idea of separating family life from professional life or social life. Little did we realise that the world we lived in not only had a very different idea, but that the environment and the society that inhabits it was mostly quite hostile and barren for a growing family. Frustrated, we then set about inventing what the environment and society could look like if it embraced childhood as much as we knew it could. The designed resources for children in the UK in those days was much like the food, were limited, unpalatable, and not understanding the nature of childhood. Mothercare and McLaren buggies were about the peak of our sophistication. In the last 2 decades, British culture and the capitalist structure that underpins it has undergone a massive transformation, not only in its food industry, but also in its understanding of childhood as a powerful marketplace. However, this, to my mind, has not necessarily improved our world, but just added a new level of status envy and competition for the new parent. Pushchairs might now be better designed and stronger, but will cost you the price of a small car. We've set up 2 children's arts charities over the last 20 years, and our mission has been to transform thinking around education, social space and design to make it more playful, fun and engaging. The future, as we all know, is about sharing more. And I spoke to, is it Sophie earlier on, who's just published a magazine completely about sharing in the future. The software revolution has open source at its heart, and PR and marketing strategies are now being designed around social media and interactivity. There's currently a social wave which the instinctive childhood imagination can teach us how to surf. As we know, we, in the privileged echelons of world culture, cannot continue to consume at the rate we currently do without stripping the resources of the planet for future generations and destabilising our host system through climate change or environmental degradation. We all want the same things, really: food, shelter, warmth and love. Instead, we are tarmacking the surface of the planet and building cathedrals of shopping. With putting nails in front of them. Our architecture and design have moved so far from human scale. That's why thinking of the needs of children is so interesting. They need for very little, really, except for perhaps the space to play and explore and be curious. Instead, they're bombarded. I mean, I say they, obviously we all were children at some point. They're bombarded with plastic, one-use toys and passive gaming technology, which has much clearer rules and rewards than the space in the real world. There is an old adage that says that a child, when given a present, will spend more time playing with the packaging than the toy inside. This is at the heart of the principle of good design, form and function, as we've been hearing today, with good art direction stimulating the imagination to explore and to learn. Within that blank space narrative Within that blank space, narrative is crucial in the land of the imagination. By inventing and telling stories, we're able to invent and imagine our worlds in the future, move with the change that's coming. The story acts as a metaphor for all our human dilemmas, ethical crises, fashion decisions, and design choices. Narrative should be central to good design. When thinking up the design for Children's Museum a few years ago, I became obsessed with the idea that the toilets and their pipes should be transparent to show how our bodily waste is disposed of. I'm now very excited by the innovative technology problems solving some of the basic needs of developing countries. Nano filters on jerry cans, thanks to a TED talk I saw recently. Self-generating toilets that transform fecal matter and urine into useful compost and energy to power the light. Brilliant stuff. And what we should be doing to what we should be building our schools around, encouraging the idea of innovative thought and fascinating design without excess or waste. That and the stories. We're about to start work on a book called Momo by a German writer from, it's a theatre production, by a German writer from Creative Parents. I don't know whether he ever lived in Berlin, but possibly. His book has baddies who are the men in grey, who surreptitiously infiltrate the community, persuading the humble and happy townsfolk to bank their spare time in the town bank, to save up to spend later. Thus they stop chatting and doing small favours for each other, put their elderly parents in institutions, and stop making things or exploring for fun. Children teach us that this spare time is the riches of life, and the curiosity to learn, inspired within play, which has been said very many times today, is at the heart of good art and design. The time bank controlled by the men in grey will be metaphorically accessed when we have ironically run out of time. Children are our future and our present. They remind us of the child we once were and how to remember what is important. So I've got this slide thing, which is actually was made when I was trying to raise some money the other day. So I'm not really doing that to you, but I thought we'd give you a sense of what we
feel free to donate.
And also, Richard did say earlier on that charities just start selling stuff, and that's the wrong thing to do. Anyway, so this is sort of what we do. We run a travelling art circus. There's a lot more to it than that, but let's give you a flavour. We cover all curriculum areas, so science, literature, nature and art. It sort of goes into every area. And again, I think art is not really separate from all those curriculum areas. It kind of is those curriculum areas. Mm-hmm. Storytelling and theatre. Fun, spectacle and performance is really selling. Focus and concentration is something which it's astonishing how every child that comes into things that we do, because of the level of adult play and engagement and the games that we do with them, that their focus is instant from the start. And people say they've got children with autism or ADHD, and it's a very different kind of experience when they're in one of our events. Again, the idea of games is much in the zeitgeist now, and I once asked a professional gamer who was in her late 20s, and it's a she, which was quite unusual, but I think she'd grown up on World of Warcraft, and was now making money from having had that interest. And I said, how can the real world be as exciting as the online world? And she said, don't even try and compete. The rewards and the levels and the challenges and the logic of the online games, because they've been constructed by a human logic machine, are always going to be simpler to understand than the real world out there. And kids are very fearful of the rules of the real world, which they're continually being told they have to learn and in order to succeed, whatever succeed means. So I think our son's quite addicted to computer games, and I've felt for a long time that was my bad parenting. And he's recently told me that the more I say bad parenting to him, the more he starts to feel like maybe he's not coming out quite right. And he said, actually, I'm really happy with who I am. So I think that's probably more the point. The live theatre. I mean, this is a thing we did in Edinburgh in the summer, which was getting kids to come in and make newspapers with us, and we call them playpers. And then we do a live show at 4:00 where the kids would tell their stories and get up on stage like here. And there's a couple of kids there, maybe they want to come and join us. And it's astonishing how much kids, when given a space to kind of, that's their space, their voice is always funnier than the comedian who's supposed to be running it. But anyway, engage with adults. Again, we don't really engage enough with kids, and kids then consequently don't really get to engage enough with adults. And I think it's the two young people that are in the audience here. I've just been astonished to watch them, how much they've been focusing. I think one's maybe got a bit of a game there as well, but focusing all day. It's really good to get young, talented people in the crew, because it really does get a bit of a sense to the audience of what the possibilities are, much more than if there's an adult up there. Blah 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 blah. Ken Robinson on Divergent Thinking, that slipped in really randomly. It's TED Talk again. But what point he was making in this one, which I particularly like, is this thing about how we are 95% divergent thinker, creative geniuses under the age of 5, and then by the age of about 17 or something, we have reduced right down to 5% or some weird random statistics. I don't know where it comes from. And his theory is that somewhere in there there's schooling. I think it's probably not just schooling. I think it's society in general. I think that what we do is we kind of we say there's one way of using a glass, and there's one way of particularly using a glass when you're at the table. And I think that all of that idea of how things should be is preventing us from using the resources that we've got as creative beings and as designers of the future in a world of great, massive, rapid change. Kind of confusion about whether we should be living in a digital age or not. Earlier on, I was thinking, well, you kind of have to kind of go with where we are and how we go from there. And I think the value of the binary and the analog systems can be best kept alive if we're all a little bit more open-minded to talk to each other.
I think that's probably a really nice moment, actually, to open things out, because it's quite... No.
I'll just do this while you're talking.
No, because it's really interesting, because that's actually kind of seems to be where you're getting to a point where the purpose of why you're doing this from a creative standpoint opens up and what that means for the creation of things for the future. Before, I just want to see if there's anyone who has any questions in the audience. Yep, over there.
It's hard to see, isn't it?
Mm. Okay, like
We're
that.
quite sort of blinded.
Yeah.
Blinded by lights.
Oh, I didn't turn that on.
I have a question to Gavin. When you look at Boyce's artwork, like we took a pissoir and put it in the gallery and signed it and said it was art. So he took some normal piece of product, and he didn't put it in a different material. Like you took some garbage bags and made it in bronze. Yeah. Why did you do that? Because you could have just chucked these bags in the white room and say this is art.
Yeah.
So why did you put it in bronze? Do you think that it would have not been art if it would have not been in bronze?
No, it would have been.
Because that's what I would think.
No, I think it would have been. I mean, I suppose I was again like playing on another kind of artistic adage, which is this idea of the painted bronze. So there was this was like another art reference, the painted bronze, maybe coming from Jasper Johns' painted bronze beer can sculpture. Yeah, I mean, obviously it would have been. I think that what I quite liked about having it cast and painted was that it was fixed. I think I quite liked the static, fixed nature of it, the way that it was going to stay in that shape forever, and that what it did was it made that shape somehow significant. So it added a certain kind of accidental specificity that actually the shape of it was specific, but it was made through a kind of random process.
Concrete or some cheaper material?
Yeah, you could do, yeah, sure. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, really, it's just bronze is actually quite well developed as a material to cast things into. I mean, there is, a long history of things being cast into bronze, and it's been made through centuries to work well in that way. I mean, painting it gets a bit weird. when I first started painting bronze sculptures, this was a bit of a anathema at the foundry. They didn't understand it. They thought I must patinate it or just heat it up and sort of show it a bit of heat and look at all the lovely bronze colour of it. They didn't like the idea of me painting it. And obviously painting is a bit strange because bronze is has an organic sense to it, and I suppose in time the paint will fall off. I guess in time, a sort of a bag which is bronze coming through, which has sort of got peeling paint on it, might be, another work.
Mm-hmm. And what is the real feedback you got from this art? I mean, was it like people saying, "Oh, it's just another artist who thinks he puts something in a white space and says this is art"?
I think that the best feedback I got probably was where I met someone who was looking at the bags and another sculpture of mine. They said they really liked this other sculpture, but they didn't understand this black bag. And I said, well, it's made of bronze. And they went, oh, okay. And they went off again. and then they looked at it again. And so somehow just to say it was made of bronze was like almost like a whole kind of concept in itself. I think that possibly what it does is it makes people, it creates a scenario where maybe the second person coming into the room might be able to witness a white space with a rubbish bag, with someone leaning over, staring at that rubbish bag. And so the view you would get is that this room with someone looking at rubbish. Almost like the performance of looking at art it is also important, and it's sort of built into the process of the art itself.
Anyone else? Do you want to tell me a little bit about, in terms of what you do together, which I think it's quite interesting, what do you think's important about the interactivity that you both have described? And do you think that the work that you do with House of Fairy Tales, in a way, is a version of artworks?
I mean, for me, working with the House of Fairy Tales is very much a kind of a point at which I can re-examine what I do through a different kind of process. Mm-hmm. And I think the interactive element of the House of Fairy Tales project means that you get a huge crossover of people who in effect they're all artists, and everyone's working at the same level. And I think that it's quite good in the way that it dismantles hierarchies of kind of importance, like that some artworks are more important than other works. I think that what we try to do is we try to give importance to the activity and the process mm-hmm. of getting involved in thinking, and that happens through trying to take quite high-level thinking and kind of make that accessible in some way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, also it's quite interesting, and I may ask this to Deborah as well, in terms of the idea around education and connected to what you're doing. Obviously, Gavin is supposed to be talking about his childhood, but obviously he's quite well known for not getting his MA and having quite an ambivalent relationship with...
Oh, was that my childhood? Okay. Well, yeah, that was my baby artist phase.
Baby artist period.
Baby artist period. Yeah.
Well, I mean, are you interested in the ideas around education and creative education and what that provides, and the design of creative education?
Yeah, I think we both spend quite a lot of time talking about it, and I think like someone said to me recently, where do you want to go with this House of Fairy Tales? What's your ultimate aim? And we'd had a whole conversation about thinking linearly and thinking laterally, and I was like, you're trying to make me think linearly again? But like he was saying, like, so if this is starting point here and where you're trying to get to, and he was trying to think of some building or something that was kind of like a place where you want to get to, and I said it's to inform government policy and ultimately to be to help the country which we're operating in to be able to lead the way in thinking about how we bring up our children to be making societies that can take a more responsible position within the future. And that's quite an epic subject, and it's not something which, you know, I think our education system is really addressing at the moment.
Also, at the moment, there's a big crisis in Britain with the new baccalaureate system, where and there's been big talks on television, on the radio, about the fact they're sort of almost getting rid of the art section of the curriculum. So you know, it's kind of interesting times in a way. You know, like art now is almost like become kind of part of the sport situation. It's art and sport. I think it's called recreation. And personally speaking, I find that rather negative, because I do actually think that art has the facility to actually, you know, it's what we need, actually. I think we need creative minds.
Check anyone else? No, so I'll keep asking questions.
It's hard to see.
I know, the lights are asking me a question. Do you, in terms of the influence that this project's had on you as an artist, do you think that it's made you more interested in the role of something like narrative in what you do?
It's strange, because I think that narrative, when we use narrative within the projects that we do, it's really useful. It provides a really kind of provides a really nice skeleton, or a sort of a framework upon which you can work, and somehow it gives you a kind of a mood and a space, and it gives you a certain kind of energy. But in a strange way, for me personally, I find myself all too often like moving away from narrative, or if there is a narrative, the narrative is simply the, you know, quite often is the frame within the frame within the frame within the frame. It becomes neutralized, I think. So I guess for me, like working with the House of Fairy Tales project, I do get to think in a slightly more, I suppose it's more time based, and I think that a lot of the work that I make is relatively sort of almost like classically sort of object by object.
Do you want to tell me also a little bit about the work that you've done with other artists, as the thing says in front of us right now?
I keep not knowing quite where to land the slide, but
do you want to tell me? Because I know I've seen the portfolio, and
I mean, I think that something that's been, and I think will be increasingly important in the way we work, is to work with different creative people to engage them in a community space, or in a childhood space, and I think it's quite hard when people are professionally in their own trajectory to kind of step sideways, and even sort of doing a bit of teaching is quite a distraction. So where we can work out something which can be quite a playful and fun way of engaging that space, I think it moves people's thinking on. So it's not just the benefits that our audience is getting from that experience, but it's also the benefits to the creative person, and how that evolves their practice and takes their thinking in a different direction. And I think that's something which, you know, is a very rich collaborative experience.
I would argue also you probably get a lot of adults who are wanting to get involved in the projects that you're doing because of the absence of that creative freedom that we get as grown-ups in our lives. If you're not an artist,
we never have any problems getting people to come and do stuff with us for the experience of it. And I think that. Matilda, who I'm working with at the moment, she was an arms procurer for the Australian government before she was working with us, and so she's definitely trying to work in a more creative field that she feels has maybe more long-term benefits for the
arms industry.
I think she realised it was morally bankrupt to work as an arms dealer. Yeah.
It's quite a change to go from arms dealing to children.
I think that's it's important. It's important. I think that's important.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the whole thing about design, and whether it's the design of an interactive show which is more community engaged or more childhood based, or whether it's a design of a product that has more functionality within the kind of the the childhood environment, we're in a really good place to be able to facilitate, enable those projects to come to life in the right way, because it's not necessarily commercially driven. So, although we've got to work that out.
Do you want to tell me also what, I mean, the thing that also I think connects what the two different projects, and definitely Gavin's work as well, is what do you think the importance is, as opposed to online experience, between the real space interaction of people, children within a group in human form interacting with each other, or individuals within a gallery space looking at an object in human form as opposed to digital floating form? Is that something that you think drives what you're doing, or is important?
Yeah, I mean, we're developing an online site at the moment, so it's not a what's the group of people who we're not when you Luddites, thank you, who actually were not against the future or against technology. They were against the big machines that were being bought by the industrialists, that were going to take away their cottage industries. So it's not that we're a Luddite organisation, but we definitely are keen to sort of like to promote the fact that there's a lot more rich experience in the simpler things of life. Mm-hmm. Which obviously is quite in the zeitgeist, and it's kind of you're struggling with that being a sort of, you know, again a capitalist concept as well. So mm-hmm. You can go and buy lots of handmade stuff to give to people for Christmas because mm-hmm. it's probably more cool or something. But I think you know, I think the relationship with making and doing and experiencing in a real space and with real people is always going to be something which is to be aspired to. Mm-hmm. I've read enough science fiction novels to know what the alternative is. The Machine, you read that one?
And yeah, so okay, well then I'm going to say, unless there's any more questions, I'm going to say thank you very much, Deborah Curtis and Gavin Turk.
Thank you.